Hating landlords is now a national pastime, but could that be hurting our economy and our potential growth? When did everyone start to hate landlords? Why is media and lots of people in social media hating on landlords? Even RTE is using taxpayer money to slag off landlords. Maybe it's ingrained. I blame monopoly. To win the game, you had to buy up as much as possible and build lots of apartments and hotels. And if you won, everyone in your family hated you. Hate is a strong word, but you get my point. Imagine you didn't buy anything in the game of Monopoly and you just tried to survive by going around the board and collecting €200 every time you pass go. I'm not sure you would survive long in that game. I'm not really trying to blame Monopoly for any hatred towards landlords. It is a great game, but perhaps there is some sort of inherent, ingrained hatred towards landlords within the Irish psyche. But there is no doubt in my mind at the moment that all the hatred coming from media and social media towards landlords is taking its toll. And I don't believe that they really understand the damage that they're actually causing with this hatred. Not all landlords are good. Some bees sting people, but that doesn't mean we go around trying to eradicate all bees, because we understand they're important for our nature, we understand they're important for pollinating flowers and crops, and they're important for our wider world. But bees wouldn't just fly around pollinating flowers if there was no honey involved in it for them. Landlords aren't as important as bees within the wider world, but landlords are vital within our economy and play a very important role. Many don't want to believe that, but within our current economic systems and until housing are free, landlords are vital for the wider economy and for growth within a nation. Perhaps there is a lack of understanding on this, because many in social media and media generally celebrate when a landlord misses out on a deal or doesn't make an acquisition or decides to sell. But they're celebrating that fewer properties will be available within the rental market in the middle of a rental crisis. Celebrating fewer landlords is counterintuitive. It means less properties to rent and thus means that rental prices are going to continue to rise. I believe good landlords are important for our economy. I think real estate investment is a good way to build long-term wealth. And I want to help people to be able to do that, to invest in real estate easily and access real estate investments quickly. And if you want to know more about that, perhaps check out some of my links below. The lack of accommodation to rent is having a major impact on our economy and perhaps is a catalyst for the economy to fail. There's countless reports from major international companies such as Microsoft, Google, employing staff and bringing them over to Ireland for them to only to leave after 3 or 4 months of arriving to Ireland because they haven't been able to find suitable accommodation for themselves and their family. This is having a major impact on the ability for companies to hire and ultimately the ability for companies to do business in Dublin. This will have major consequences, and not having a functioning rental market will limit and perhaps cripple Ireland's potential. Just like if there was no bees, some flowers would die off. If there's no landlords or apartments available, workers or students won't be able to come to the city. We do have lots of students and other people protesting about the lack of affordable accommodation in many locations across Ireland. But what do people really expect if all the landlords are driven out of the market? It's the same politicians and media that champion these protests that are actually criticising the landlords that are leaving the market. It's kind of like the snake is eating its own tail. If you're in Dublin at the moment, and I suggest it's probably like this in many other cities around Ireland, finding a taxi on a night out is extremely difficult because there is far less taxi drivers at the moment. The vast majority of the public understand that allowing Uber or perhaps some deregulation of the taxi industry would help solve some of the supply issue, and there are many campaigns at the moment trying to recruit more and more taxi drivers. And the same is true within the property industry. The more options and providers you have, the better. Different types of providers, different types of landlords will help improve supply within the rental sector and make things more affordable. But the opposite is happening. Rather than trying to get more and more people to become landlords, regulations are getting harder and harder, and the media and social media are targeting landlords and smearing them and demonising landlords. Pitting private landlords against home buyers when arguably the rental crisis is far worse than the home buying crisis. If people can't rent and move around quickly depending on their job or perhaps education, this will have major negative impacts for the economy as a whole. Thousands of landlords are leaving the market, and there's lots of good reasons why. They're overtaxed, they're overregulated, rental caps, there's now talk of eviction bans, the RTB system is an absolute nightmare for landlords. And at the moment, the only landlords that are going to be left is the state as a landlord, private investment funds and pension funds, and the landlords that don't care about the regulations. All the good landlords that care about the regulations are now leaving, and they're leaving because of fears of more regulations coming on top of them and the negative stigma that comes with being a landlord now. You might think I'm joking, but landlords do have feelings too. People do want to have some pride in themselves, and they want to have pride in what they do in terms of their profession or their trade or whatever role or task that they are generally doing. If a task is negatively looked on by the wider society, people generally don't want to do that. The vast majority of people don't want to do something that has something very negative associated with it. People want to be respected in what they do. All the landlord bashing on media and social media is having its toll on landlords. The vast majority of private landlords in Ireland are small landlords. Generally they have 1 or 2 properties, and they bought those properties to help them in their retirement. I believe people should be encouraged to invest for their retirement, and generally speaking, real estate has proven to be a good long-term investment for people's retirement. And if you're not in a state job, you do really need to make sure you're protecting yourself into retirement. If your pension is not protected by the state, or you weren't a state employee, it is vitally important that you go out of your way to protect yourself against inflation. Inflation is going to eat away at private pensions over the next few years and devalue a lot of pensions that are out there. Real estate is generally a good way to protect yourself against this. So if you're not in a state-backed job, it is more important that you pay attention to this. Being a landlord is not easy. They take on a lot of risk by investing a large amount of money. Sometimes they borrow as well, and they have to hope that they get a good tenant that pays rent and looks after the property as well. They also have to hope that the market doesn't shift or doesn't crash, because if it does, perhaps a bank could be coming in to repossess their property, and all those years of hard work and capital that they've invested in could be wiped out in minutes. In return for taking that risk and putting up the capital, they expect rent in return. Tenants gain the benefit of being able to live or work in a certain location that they need to be for work or education for a short period of time without having to put down any capital. And in return, they pay rent. One doesn't survive without the other in our current economic system, much like the bee doesn't survive without the flower. Until housing is free and there's no cost of actually providing those houses, there will always need to be someone who is willing to take the risk and invest their capital, and therefore there will always be a need for landlords if people want the flexibility to be able to move around and stay in one location for perhaps a year or 2 without having to invest large amount of capital. The alternative to landlords is no properties to rent. People will be forced to invest large amount of capital even if they only want to stay in a location for a short period of time. The alternative to that is perhaps state housing, and perhaps people go on a list. It's free state housing. People will go on a list anytime they want to change location based on their employment or their education. They may need to apply for a new accommodation depending on their circumstances as those circumstances change. Price for that option would be higher taxes for the working class, and also it would probably result in less choices as well. And there's also going to be winners and losers to that. Not all properties are the same. They're not all in the same location, so not everyone can get the exact same house. Many may disagree with me on this. Some may call me tone deaf, and I understand that, because there is lots of different views on how housing should be provided, and each one of them has its own merits and own pros and cons. Hopefully this video provided some food for thought, and that there is a need for balance out there, particularly in some of the hatred that's leveled towards landlords. Hopefully you'll still be able to hit the like button on this video, and as always, thanks for watching.